Thanksgiving was supposed to be about family, about gratitude, about warmth around the dinner table. But for me, that night turned into the coldest moment of my life. As the turkey was carved, my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, looked across the table and announced I owed her $2,500 a month for the guest room I'd been living in. My son, Daniel, stared at his plate, silent. My heart stopped. This was the same son who had begged me to move in after my husband's death, promising I'd never feel alone. Now, surrounded by family, I felt like a stranger in my own bloodline. I had no idea that this cruel announcement was just the beginning of something much darker, an elaborate plan that could cost me not just my home, but my dignity, my security, and perhaps my family forever. Thanksgiving at Daniel's house was always a production. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, mingling with cinnamon and nutmeg from the pumpkin pies cooling on the counter. The dining table was set beautifully. Vanessa had gone all out this year, gold-rimmed plates, crystal glasses, and a centerpiece of autumn leaves and candles. For a moment, I let myself believe it was going to be a warm family holiday, like the ones Harold and I used to host. We gathered around the table, 15 of us in all, siblings, cousins, kids running around underfoot. Vanessa, in her immaculate cream sweater, moved with the confidence of a hostess in full control. Daniel sat beside her, smiling faintly, his hand wrapped around a glass of wine. I took my usual place at the far end, between Martha's empty chair — she was away with her own family this year — and my grandson, Caleb, who was busy piling mashed potatoes onto his plate. Conversation flowed easily at first. Vanessa complimented her sister's new haircut, Daniel teased his cousin about the football game, and I shared a story about Harold from a Thanksgiving 30 years ago. The laughter warmed me. For a while, I felt like I belonged. Then, as the turkey was being carved, Vanessa set her knife down, cleared her throat, and smiled the kind of smile that warned trouble was coming. "Before we start eating," she said sweetly, "I just need to address something important." Her voice sliced through the room like a cold wind. Conversations stopped. Forks hovered in midair. I looked up from my plate, expecting perhaps an announcement about a family trip or holiday plans. Instead, she said, "Evelyn, starting next month, the rent for the guest room will be $2,500. The words landed like a slap. I blinked, thinking I must have misheard. "I'm sorry?" I asked, my voice small. Vanessa folded her manicured hands in front of her. $2,500 a month for the room you're staying in. It's still below market rate, so I think it's fair." The table fell silent. 15 pairs of eyes darted between us. Daniel stared hard at his plate, swirling his fork in his mashed potatoes. He didn't say a word. I felt my chest tighten. The turkey I'd been looking forward to all day suddenly tasted like sawdust. "Vanessa," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "this is Daniel's home. He invited me to live here after Harold passed. This is our home," Vanessa cut in sharply, her tone sugar-coated but her eyes cold. "And while we've been happy to have you here, things have changed. Expenses have gone up. It's only fair you contribute." I looked to Daniel, desperate for him to speak up, to remind his wife of the promise he'd made me 3 years ago. But he kept his head down, shoulders stiff, his wine glass trembling slightly in his hand. The sting of betrayal cut deep. Not just because Vanessa had blindsided me in front of the entire family, but because my own son, my only boy, sat in silence, letting her words hang like a judgment I deserved. Around the table, people shifted uncomfortably. A few cousins exchanged awkward glances. Vanessa's sister reached for the wine bottle as if it could somehow ease the tension. I wanted to sink into my chair, to disappear. But instead, my mind drifted back to the day I'd first moved in. Harold had been gone just a few months. The house we'd shared for 40 years felt unbearably empty. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway was a reminder of him. I tried to keep busy, visiting Rebecca and Linda, but their lives were full of their own children and challenges. Daniel had called one evening, his voice gentle. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that big house. Come stay with us for a while. The kids would love to have you around, just until you feel stronger." At the time, Vanessa had been warm, even welcoming. "Of course, Evelyn," she'd said over the phone. "We'll make the guest room comfortable. It'll be nice having family under one roof." I'd packed up my life in boxes, donating most of Harold's clothes to the Veterans Center, giving away the furniture that wouldn't fit. The old house in Maplewood I couldn't bring myself to sell, so Daniel promised, "We'll figure it out later." I trusted him. He was my son. The first few months in their home had been filled with family dinners, laughter, and the comforting chaos of children. I cooked meals, helped with homework, listened to Vanessa talk about her work. I truly believed I'd found a safe harbor in my grief, but somewhere along the way, something shifted. The warmth in Vanessa's voice cooled, replaced by polite distance. Daniel seemed busier, distracted. And now here we were, on Thanksgiving, with Vanessa demanding rent, as if I were a tenant in need of eviction. Back at the table, my cheeks burned. "Vanessa," I began again, my voice steadying despite the ache in my chest. "I've always paid for my own expenses. Groceries, medication, This isn't about groceries, Evelyn," she interrupted smoothly. "It's about fairness, about not taking advantage of the situation." The word advantage stung. I looked at Daniel one last time, searching his face for the boy who had once run to me with skinned knees, the man who had held my hand at Harold's funeral. But all I saw was silence. Vanessa's smile didn't falter. "We'll discuss details after dinner," she said, lifting her glass in a mock toast. "But I think we all agree. Family or not, everyone contributes." The clinking of silverware resumed. Conversation picked up in forced spurts, but the warmth had drained from the room. I sat quietly, my appetite gone, my heart heavy with the realization that I was no longer a mother at her son's table. I was a guest, and soon perhaps an unwelcome one. Dinner eventually wound down, though the tension clung to the air like smoke that refused to clear. The laughter was forced, the conversation fragmented. As dessert plates were collected, Vanessa moved with her usual grace, her smile polished, but her eyes sharp whenever they met mine. When the last guest had left, Daniel disappeared into the kitchen, clattering dishes just loud enough to avoid conversation. Vanessa appeared at my bedroom door holding a slim folder in her perfectly manicured hands. "I thought we could go over the rental agreement now," she said casually, as though discussing what pie to serve next year. "A rental agreement?" I repeated, my voice low. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, flipping the folder open and laying the papers on my desk. "Here it is. I've kept it simple. Just the essentials. $2,500 due on the first of each month, and of course some house guidelines." I scanned the pages, my pulse quickening. Curfew at 9 p.m. No use of the kitchen after 7 p.m. No overnight guests without written permission. Bathroom schedules. Even a line about limiting interference during family activities. "Family activities?" I asked softly. Vanessa smiled, her tone dripping with false kindness. "It just means the kids need space, structure. We all do better with boundaries." Boundaries. Such a tidy word for exclusion. I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Vanessa, this is my son's home. Daniel asked me—" "And Daniel supports this," she interrupted smoothly, glancing toward the kitchen. "Don't you, honey?" There was a pause, the faint clink of a plate, then Daniel's voice, quiet and strained. "Let's not do this tonight." I turned toward the doorway, hoping he would look at me, but he stayed in the shadows, shoulders hunched. "See?" Vanessa said brightly, slipping the papers closer to me. "It's better to get everything clear. That way there are no misunderstandings." My eyes burned. I picked up the papers, flipping through the pages again, though the words blurred. Curfew, restrictions, rent. Every line a reminder that I was no longer a mother in this house, but a burden to be managed. As Vanessa left the room, she called over her shoulder, "You have until the 1st to sign. We're being generous, giving you time." The door clicked softly behind her. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the papers heavy in my lap. My mind raced back to the dining room earlier. I remembered the glance from Daniel's cousin Mark, sharp and disapproving when Vanessa made her announcement. I remembered Aunt Claire leaning in as she hugged me goodbye, whispering, "We'll talk later, Evelyn." There had been sympathy in their eyes, small sparks of solidarity in a room gone cold. But those sparks dimmed when Daniel appeared in my doorway, drying his hands on a towel. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "let's just keep the peace, okay? It's better if we don't involve everyone else." "You don't want them to know," I said, my tone steady, though my heart thudded painfully. He shifted uncomfortably. "It's just private, family business. We'll handle it." Handle it. A phrase that sounded less like protection and more like containment. "Daniel," I said softly, "do you remember why I came here?" He hesitated, avoiding my gaze. "Of course I do." I searched his face, trying to find the young man who had once carried boxes into this very house, reassuring me that I'd never have to face the world alone. But that boy seemed to have vanished, replaced by a man who couldn't, or wouldn't, stand up to his wife. "Things are different now," he said finally, almost apologetically. "Vanessa's job. It's demanding. We have higher expenses. The house. The unspoken words hovered between us. The house had become hers in every way that mattered. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. He took my silence as consent, exhaled, and left the room without meeting my eyes. Alone again, I stared at the rental agreement on my lap. The Vanessa who had once welcomed me with coffee and warm smiles was gone. In her place stood someone calculating, controlled, her ambition sharpening every word, and Daniel. Daniel was no longer the shield I had believed him to be. The warmth of Thanksgiving had vanished entirely, replaced by a cold clarity that seeped deep into my bones. I didn't sleep that night. The rental agreement sat on the nightstand like a shadow, its words burning through my thoughts. Instead of rest, my mind wandered backward, far from Vanessa's crisp paper and Daniel's silence, back to the years when my life was nothing but them. I had been 26 when I hung up my nurse's uniform for the last time. Rebecca had just turned 4, Daniel was a toddler, and Linda was on the way. Harold's construction work had been steady, and we decided I'd stay home with the kids. It wasn't an easy decision. We could have used the extra income. But Harold had looked me in the eyes and said, "Our children need you more than the money does." Those years were a blur of sticky fingers, scraped knees, and endless laundry. I made Halloween costumes from old sheets, baked birthday cakes from scratch, spent long afternoons helping with school projects. Harold worked hard, often late, but when he came home, there was always dinner waiting, and the house was warm. I had given my career, my time, my energy, all for my family, and I never regretted it. Now, decades later, sitting in a guest room that wasn't mine, I wondered when that sacrifice had become invisible. The next morning, Vanessa was already at the kitchen counter when I came down, laptop open, nails tapping against her coffee mug. She didn't look up. "Morning," I said quietly. "Morning," she replied flatly, her eyes still on the screen. Then, as though it had just occurred to her, she added, "By the way, utilities went up again, and groceries." I hesitated. "I've been buying most of my own groceries." "That's not the point, Evelyn," she said with a thin smile, finally glancing at me. "Everything costs more. That's just reality." I nodded faintly, though something inside me tightened. Over the next week, her comments multiplied like weeds. "Electric bill is higher this month. Gas prices are insane. Do you know how much it costs to run a house like this?" The subtext was always the same. I was part of the problem. Daniel, for his part, became an expert at disappearing. When I asked if we could talk, he'd mumble something about work deadlines. When Vanessa's comments became barbed, he'd retreat to the garage, claiming to be fixing something. One evening, I caught him in the hallway. "Daniel, we need to talk about this rent business." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the living room where Vanessa sat scrolling through her phone. "Mom, it's just... things are tight right now. You know how it is." I stared at him. "Tight? Daniel, you and Vanessa both have good jobs. You just put in a new pool last summer." He flinched slightly. "Vanessa's promotion. It came with expectations. We have to keep up a certain lifestyle." There it was. Not, "we have bills," or "we're struggling." No, it was about appearances, about image. "I'm not a stranger renting a room from you," I said softly. He sighed. "No one's saying that." But the words rang hollow. After that, I stopped trying to bring it up. The more I pushed, the further he retreated. Vanessa's voice filled the silence he left behind, each casual remark another reminder that I was no longer a welcome fixture, just an expense to be managed. I began to notice the distance in smaller ways too. Vanessa stopped asking if I wanted to join her for coffee in the mornings. The kids spent more time in their rooms, their play dates scheduled when I wasn't around. I started feeling like a shadow in my own son's home. One afternoon, I overheard Vanessa on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, well, expenses are through the roof. It's not sustainable," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. A pause. "Yes, she's still here. We're working on that." I froze in the hallway. Working on that. The words echoed in my ears. Later that night, as I sat in my room, I realized something painful. The warmth I had felt when I first moved in had cooled slowly, like embers dying in a fireplace. And now, all that was left was smoke. The following Saturday, I escaped the tense quiet of Daniel's house and took a walk around the neighborhood. Early winter sunlight filtered through bare branches, the air crisp with the promise of snow. As I turned the corner, I spotted Martha sweeping her porch. "Evelyn!" she called, setting her broom aside. "Come in for some tea. You look like you could use it." Martha had been my neighbor for over 20 years back in Maplewood. When I moved in with Daniel, she promised to keep an eye on the old place. She was the kind of friend who noticed everything and who never hesitated to speak her mind. Inside her cozy kitchen, the scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air. I wrapped my hands around a steaming mug, grateful for the warmth. "You look tired," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Is everything all right at Daniel's?" I hesitated. Vanessa mentioned charging me rent. A lot of rent. Martha's eyebrows shot up. "Rent? In your son's house?" "It's complicated," I said, though the word felt like a flimsy excuse. She leaned forward. "Evelyn, I've been around long enough to know that when people say it's complicated, it usually means something's wrong. And with Vanessa..." Martha let the sentence hang, her expression tightening. I sighed. Things have changed since I moved in. She's different, colder, always talking about expenses. Martha tapped her fingers against the mug. "That woman has ambition. I've seen the type before. And ambition's not bad, unless someone else's security is in the way." Her words sank deep, but I tried to shake them off. It's probably just about the money. Maybe things really are tight. Martha gave me a look that said she wasn't buying it. 2 days later, she called me. "Evelyn, can you come over, now?" I walked the short distance to her house, my curiosity piqued. Martha met me at the door, her expression serious. "I wasn't going to say anything until I was sure," she began. "But I just overheard something you need to know." She led me into the kitchen, lowered her voice. "Vanessa was on her phone this morning outside by the driveway. I was pruning my roses. Yes, even in the cold. They needed it, and I couldn't help overhearing." My stomach tightened. What did she say? She was talking to a real estate agent about Maplewood. I froze. "Maplewood? My house?" Martha nodded. She asked about listing prices, said she had a property in the family she was thinking about selling. Sounded like she was fishing for how much she could get. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. She doesn't own that house. It's in my name. Exactly, Martha said, which is why I'm telling you. Something's not right, Evelyn. Charging you rent, talking to agents about your property. It's all too convenient. Her words set off a storm inside me. Up until now, I'd told myself Vanessa's behavior was about money, or maybe just her need for control. But selling Maplewood? That was different. That was planning. I thought back to the day Daniel had said, "We'll figure out the house later." I trusted him, trusted that later meant a time when we could sit down together and decide. I never imagined later might mean without me. "Evelyn," Martha said, her tone gentler now, "you need to be careful. You've got something she wants. And if she's already talking to an agent..." I nodded slowly, the weight of her words pressing down on me. That evening, back in my room, I stared at the old box of paperwork I'd brought from Maplewood. The deed was still in there, along with Harold's carefully labeled folders. Documentation is protection, he'd always said. I hadn't looked at them in years, but suddenly they felt like a lifeline. Over dinner, Vanessa was in a particularly good mood. "Work is going really well," she said brightly, passing the salad. "I might have some exciting news soon." Daniel smiled faintly, as though he'd heard this before. I wondered if her exciting news had anything to do with Maplewood. I watched her across the table, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The same eyes that had once looked at me with warmth now seemed to measure, to calculate. For the first time since that Thanksgiving dinner, I felt something new stirring beneath the heaviness in my chest. It wasn't hope exactly, but it wasn't despair either. It was suspicion, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of resolve. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Martha had told me. The idea of Vanessa speaking to a real estate agent about my Maplewood house churned in my stomach. Maplewood wasn't just property. It was the home Harold and I had bought together, the place we raised our children. It was full of birthdays, scraped knees, Christmas mornings, and Harold's laughter in every corner. I waited until the house was quiet. Daniel in the den watching TV, Vanessa upstairs with the kids, before pulling the metal lockbox from under my bed. It was heavier than I remembered. Harold had insisted we keep all our important papers in one place, neatly labeled and organized. I ran my hand over the worn lid, feeling his presence as clearly as if he were standing beside me. I opened the box and was greeted by rows of manila folders, each marked in Harold's neat handwriting. Insurance policies, medical records, pension documents, and there, near the back, property, Maplewood. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled it out. Inside was the original deed, the ink still crisp after all these years. I scanned the page, my breath catching when I saw it. Owner, Evelyn Margaret Parker. Only my name. Not Daniel's, not Vanessa's. Just mine. Relief washed over me, warm and grounding. They couldn't take it from me, not legally, not without my consent, but the relief was short-lived, because if Vanessa was talking to agents, she wasn't planning to do things legally. Beneath the deed was an envelope, yellowed with age. My name was written across it in Harold's handwriting. I sat back on the bed, tears already blurring my vision as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Harold's words scrawled in his familiar, careful script. Dolly. If you're reading this, I'm not there to say it in person. The house in Maplewood, it's more than a home. It's your safety, your shield. Keep it in your name no matter what. Don't let anyone talk you into selling unless it's what you want. Documentation is protection. I trust you'll use it if you need to. All my love, H. I pressed the letter to my chest, my tears falling freely. Harold had always been the practical one, thinking ahead in ways I never did. He must have known, in some quiet way, that there might come a time when I would have to stand alone. I read the letter again, this time feeling something stir deep inside me. Not grief, not fear, but a steady, rising determination. Vanessa saw me as a burden. Daniel treated me like an inconvenience, but I had spent my life caring for this family, sacrificing for them. I had given up my career, my independence, my home, all for their comfort. And now, when I needed a safe harbor, they wanted to cast me aside. No, not this time. I placed the letter back in its envelope and tucked it carefully behind the deed. My fingers lingered on Harold's handwriting, as if touching it could pass some of his strength into me. The next morning, I sat at the small desk in my room, the deed and Harold's letter laid out before me. I stared at them as I sipped my coffee, my mind sharpening with each passing minute. Vanessa was ambitious. She was calculating, and she was counting on me being too meek, too dependent, too heartbroken to fight back. She was wrong. That afternoon, while Vanessa was at work and Daniel was picking up the kids from school, I made a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but a plan. Step 1, confirm the status of my property. Step 2, learn what legal protections I had. Step 3, prepare for whatever Vanessa was planning next. The more I wrote, the stronger I felt. For the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting, I was acting. I carefully returned the deed and Harold's letter to the lockbox, slid it back under my bed, and locked my door. Vanessa might have control over much of this house, but Maplewood was mine, and I intended to keep it that way. That evening, over dinner, Vanessa was unusually cheerful. She chatted about her latest project at work, about the company's end-of-year bonuses, about the rising property values in our area, especially in older neighborhoods like Maplewood, she said casually, sipping her wine. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Maplewood? She smiled innocently. Oh, just something I read. Places like that are becoming very popular again. Investors are paying top dollar for properties they can renovate. Daniel nodded absently, not looking at me. I forced a small smile, my heart pounding. If she thought I was oblivious, she was mistaken. That night, lying in bed, I thought of Harold's words again. Documentation is protection. I would protect what was mine, no matter what it took. And for the first time since moving in with Daniel and Vanessa, I felt something close to peace, because I finally had a plan. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a warm, wood-paneled office that hadn't changed much in 20 years. The shelves were still lined with dusty legal books, the same family photo from 1989 still perched on the desk. Across from me sat Mr. Collins, Harold's old attorney. He was older now, with more silver than black in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Evelyn Parker, he said, leaning back with a smile. It's been too long. How can I help you? I pulled the deed from my purse, laying it gently on his desk. I need to make sure this house is still mine. No liens, no co-owners, no surprises. He glanced at the document, then turned serious. Is something going on? I hesitated for a moment, then told him everything. About Vanessa's sudden demand for rent, about the restrictions, about the overheard conversation with a realtor. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he tapped his pen thoughtfully against his notepad. I'll run a title search, he said. It's simple enough. We'll make sure no one's trying to be clever behind your back. Thank you, I said, relief flooding my chest. Give me an hour, he added. You can wait here if you like. I spent the next 60 minutes trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. When Mr. Collins returned, his face was tight. I found something, he said slowly. My stomach dropped. What is it? He slid a printed document across the desk. 6 weeks ago, someone submitted a preliminary application for a reverse mortgage on the Maplewood property. It was denied. No final paperwork was filed, but they tried to initiate the process. I stared at the paper. There, at the bottom, was my name, or at least what looked like it. I didn't sign this, I said immediately. I've never even considered a reverse mortgage. I believe you, Collins replied. But whoever submitted this forged your signature. And look at this. See the email address listed? He pointed to a generic Gmail account, one I didn't recognize. That's not mine, I said. I ran a trace, he continued. The IP address connects back to your son's house. Evelyn, someone in that home is trying to use your property as collateral. The room spun slightly. But the application was denied? For now, because they didn't have full documentation. But if they'd gotten power of attorney or managed to prove you were mentally unfit... His voice trailed off, but the implication was loud and clear. I sat, frozen, unable to fully absorb what I was hearing. You think they want to declare me incompetent? I think, Colin said gently, you need to prepare for the possibility that they're building a case against you, especially if they're laying groundwork with forged documents. It's not just about rent, Evelyn. It's about control, and removing you from the picture makes that easier. The words hit like a hammer to the chest. Removing me, I repeated. He nodded solemnly. Have they ever mentioned assisted living? Nursing homes? My breath caught. Golden Pines has great memory care. Wouldn't it be nice to have some help? More independence, but also structure. The puzzle pieces snapped together in a terrifying picture. I wasn't just a burden. I was a problem to be solved. And now I knew how they planned to solve me. I don't have dementia, I said fiercely. I take care of myself. I cook, I clean, I drive. I believe you, Colin said. But if they push hard enough, and if no one's there to advocate for you, it can get messy. The fear turned to fire in my gut. What can I do? We document everything, he said firmly. Get copies of your medical records. Show you're of sound mind. Set up legal protections for your property. And if you're willing, we contact the authorities about the forgery. Ooh, I nodded slowly. Do it. Mr. Collins leaned forward. One more thing. Don't confront them yet. Let them think you're still in the dark. We need time to build your defense before they make their move. I sat there, numb, the weight of betrayal heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Harold's voice echoed in my memory. This house is your shield, Dolly. Don't let anyone take it from you. I had thought Vanessa's rent demand was the worst of it, but now I saw the bigger truth. She didn't just want money, she wanted me gone. The days after my meeting with Mr. Collins were some of the most suffocating I'd ever experienced. I went home with my heart pounding, my mind racing, but my face carefully composed. His advice echoed in my head. Don't confront them yet. Let them think you're still in the dark. Vanessa seemed determined to test that composure. She began pressing harder about the rental agreement, her tone increasingly impatient. One morning, she knocked briskly on my door, holding the papers like a gift she couldn't wait to present. Evelyn, she said with that sweet, poisonous smile, we really need to get this signed. I've already marked where you should initial. I'm still thinking about it, I replied, making my voice soft, hesitant. It's a lot of money. She tilted her head in mock sympathy. I understand, but if it's too much, we'll have to look at alternatives. Alternatives? Her smile sharpened. You know, other living arrangements. There's that senior community near Golden Pines. They have great amenities. More independence for you, more space for us, a win-win. It took everything in me to keep my face neutral. She's already making her move. I'll think about it, I murmured again, forcing my voice to tremble slightly. She seemed satisfied, like a hunter who believed her prey was cornered. Daniel was no better. When he did speak to me, it was only to echo Vanessa's points. Mom, it's just business. You can't expect to live here forever without contributing. Vanessa's trying to make it easier. I wanted to scream at him that I had contributed my whole life, that the reason he had a home, a family, a future was because I had poured decades into raising him. But instead, I dropped my gaze and let him believe I was too tired to argue. If they thought I was weak, they'd let their guard down. At night, behind my closed door, I reviewed documents, wrote notes, and rehearsed questions for Mr. Collins. In the daylight, I became the picture of compliance, a widow too worn down to fight. Still, the weight of it all pressed on me. I needed someone on my side, someone who wouldn't doubt my words the way Daniel had. I thought of my daughters, Rebecca and Linda. Rebecca lived in Boston, a sharp, practical woman who had inherited Harold's stubborn streak. Linda was in Seattle, juggling twin boys and a job that never seemed to stop. I decided to call Rebecca first. She answered on the third ring. "Hi, Mom, how are you?" I hesitated. "Rebecca, I need to talk to you about something serious. Vanessa wants me to sign a rental agreement. If I don't, she's suggesting I move out. She's also been asking about Maplewood." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Mom, I know you and Vanessa haven't always gotten along, but I'm sure she means well. Maybe she just wants to formalize things so everyone's on the same page." "Rebecca, it's $2,500 a month," I said, my voice shaking. "And she's already hinted about assisted living." "Assisted living isn't the worst idea," Rebecca interrupted gently. "You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe a community with people your own age." My heart sank. "Rebecca." "Mom, I can't get involved in whatever's going on between you and Daniel. I'm sorry, I have to get to a meeting." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in silence for a long time before trying Linda. She picked up, the sound of children's voices in the background. "Hi, Mom, can I call you back? The boys." "Linda, wait. It's important. Vanessa's trying to push me into signing something. If I don't, she's talking about other arrangements. I think she wants me out of the house." Linda exhaled audibly. "Mom, Vanessa can be intense, but I'm sure it's just about setting boundaries. You've been there a while, and they have their own family now." "I'm part of that family," I said softly. "Of course you are, but—" Her voice trailed off. "Look, Mom, I'm in the middle of a work crisis. I can't handle this right now." She hung up before I could say more. I lowered the phone, my chest aching. I had hoped my daughters would see through Vanessa's careful facade, but from hundreds of miles away, all they saw was the polished image she presented. For the first time, the full weight of my isolation sank in. Daniel wouldn't protect me. Rebecca and Linda wouldn't step in. I was truly on my own. That night, I stared at the ceiling, the house silent around me. Vanessa thought she had me cornered. Daniel thought I'd cave quietly. My daughters thought I was overreacting. But they didn't know what I knew now, and they didn't know that I had no intention of going quietly. The next morning, I called Martha. I couldn't tell her everything, not over the phone, but I needed her help. She met me at her back porch, bundled in a heavy coat, a knitted scarf wrapped snugly around her neck. "You look like a woman on a mission," she said, ushering me inside. "I need to gather evidence," I told her quietly once the door was shut. "Collins thinks they may try to declare me incompetent. We need to prove I'm of sound mind and that they've been acting suspiciously." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Suspiciously is putting it politely. That woman has something planned, Evelyn. I can smell it." For the next hour, we sifted through everything I had: bank statements, letters, emails I'd printed over the past few months. We looked for anything unusual, charges I didn't recognize, mail that had gone missing. "I think she's intercepting some of your mail," Martha muttered, holding up a credit card offer addressed to me, but delivered to Daniel's address. "These kinds of offers, someone could use them to open accounts." I added it to the growing pile. Every piece of paper felt like a shield, thin but necessary. That afternoon, while Vanessa was at work, I slipped quietly into the shared office to check the printer tray. As I suspected, there were pages of financial projections, interest rate charts, and an ominous folder labeled Property Management, Maplewood. I didn't take them. Collins had warned me about potential legal issues, but I memorized what I could. Back at Martha's house, I spread the notes across her kitchen table. "You've got a trail," she said. "Now you need to make sure you're safe until Collins can act." We were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing on the counter. Martha glanced at the screen, frowned, and stepped outside to answer. I busied myself organizing the documents until she returned, her face tight. That was Greg, she said, referring to her cousin who worked as a private investigator. You're not going to like this. A chill ran down my spine. What? He just saw Vanessa leaving his office. She hired him 2 weeks ago. My mouth went dry. For what? Martha hesitated. She wanted surveillance on you. I gripped the edge of the table. Surveillance? She's been asking him to document any inconsistencies, forgetting appointments, leaving the stove on, anything she can use to show you're declining. I felt the blood drain from my face. She's building a case. Martha nodded grimly. Greg didn't take the job. He doesn't like her methods. But if she's looking for someone to do this, she might find another investigator willing to play along. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Part of me felt vindicated, proof that my fears weren't paranoia, but another part sank under the weight of what this meant. Vanessa wasn't just improvising, she was planning meticulously, step by step. She's good at this, I whispered. Yes, Martha agreed, and that's why you need to be better. We sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of it pressing down on us. Then Martha reached across the table, her hand firm on mine. You have Collins. You have me. You're not alone in this. Her words steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. There was a path forward. It was narrow and dangerous, but it was there. Still, the hope was tempered by fear. If Vanessa had already started laying the groundwork for a guardianship, she might be closer to acting than I realized. I thought of Collins's warning. Don't confront them yet. Let them think you're still in the dark. It was harder now than ever to keep my expression neutral at home. At dinner that night, Vanessa complained about the stress of managing a big house and suggested again that some people might be happier in a place with more support. Daniel nodded along, his fork moving absently across his plate. I forced a weak smile, feigning distraction. Let her think I was too preoccupied to notice her barbs. Later, alone in my room, I went through my notes again. Every date, every overheard comment, every suspicious detail was written in careful script. I imagined Vanessa in some lawyer's office, spinning her story, presenting her evidence of my decline. The fear tightened around me like a vice, but beneath it, stronger now than before, was resolve. She thought I was cornered. She thought no one would believe me. She was wrong. It was a Thursday morning when Vanessa made her move. I woke to the sound of unfamiliar voices downstairs. As I pulled on my sweater and stepped into the hallway, I saw 2 men in polo shirts embroidered with the name of a moving company, standing awkwardly by the front door. Vanessa was speaking to them in that brisk, efficient tone she used when giving orders. Daniel stood off to the side, his arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut through their conversation. Vanessa turned, her smile perfectly composed. "Evelyn, good morning. I was just explaining to the movers that you'll be transitioning to Golden Pines today. They'll help pack your things." My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm. "Golden Pines?" "It's all arranged," she said cheerfully. "I toured the facility myself. Lovely place. You'll have your own room, activities, full-time care. It's exactly what you need." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, still not meeting my gaze. "And this is your decision?" I asked him directly. He hesitated, then mumbled, "It's for the best, Mom." I nodded slowly, my expression neutral. Vanessa thought she had won. She thought I'd been worn down, cornered. But she hadn't counted on what I had tucked neatly into the leather portfolio under my arm. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "before we go anywhere, I think we should discuss a few things." Her smile flickered. "There's nothing to discuss. The arrangements are made." I walked past her into the living room and set the portfolio on the coffee table. Actually, there's quite a bit to discuss. From the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel frown in confusion. I opened the portfolio, sliding out the deed to Maplewood and laying it flat on the table. First, the house in Maplewood is mine. It has always been mine, and I have no intention of selling it or using it as collateral for any loans. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. No one said anything about loans. I pulled out the printout from Mr. Collins's title search. Then perhaps you can explain this preliminary reverse mortgage application filed from this address with my forged signature. Daniel's head snapped toward her, his expression stunned. Vanessa, what is this? She laughed lightly, though her voice was just a touch too high. Oh, for heaven's sake, Evelyn, that's obviously a mistake. Some sort of clerical error. You know how messy these financial institutions can be. I didn't respond. Instead, I slid another paper onto the table. My recent credit report showing inquiries from multiple lenders I had never contacted. Messy enough to open accounts in my name without my knowledge? Vanessa's composure cracked, just for a moment. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her handbag. Daniel's face was pale. Vanessa, did you... Daniel, she interrupted sharply, don't be ridiculous. Your mother is confused. This is exactly why Golden Pines is the best option for her. She's imagining... I cut her off. I am not confused. My voice was steady now, each word deliberate. I have copies of every document. I have legal counsel. And if you try to move me out of this house without my consent, I will call the police. The room fell silent. The movers exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel finally looked at me, his expression a mix of shock and guilt. Mom, you knew? I've known for weeks, I said. I know about the forged documents. I know about the conversations with real estate agents. I know about the plan to have me declared incompetent. Vanessa's eyes flashed. That's absurd. Who told you that? Someone who actually cares about my well-being, I said, not someone who sees me as an obstacle. Her mask slipped then, just for an instant. Anger, sharp and unfiltered, crossed her face, but she recovered quickly, pasting the polite smile back in place. You're making a mistake, Evelyn, she said softly. This could have been simple. Now it's going to get messy. I closed the portfolio and stood. That's fine. I'm not afraid of messy. Daniel stared at me, still struggling to process what he was hearing. For the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in his eyes when he looked at Vanessa. The balance in the room had shifted, and we all knew it. Before anyone could say another word, the sound of a firm knock echoed from the front door. Vanessa froze, her carefully controlled expression slipping for just a second. Daniel stepped forward, still pale, and opened the door. Standing there, in his neatly pressed suit, was Mr. Collins. Beside him were two uniformed police officers. Good morning, Collins said, stepping inside with the confidence of someone who knew he was exactly where he belonged. I believe we have some matters to address regarding Mrs. Parker's property. Vanessa's eyes darted from Collins to the officers. What is this? Why are the police here? Collins placed his briefcase on the coffee table next to my portfolio. Mrs. Parker has retained me as her attorney. We have evidence of attempted fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. These officers are here to ensure her safety while we proceed with formal charges. Daniel's jaw dropped. Charges? Yes, Collins said smoothly, opening his case to reveal neatly stacked documents against any parties found complicit in these actions, including, potentially, both of you. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh, though it rang hollow. This is ridiculous. Evelyn doesn't know what she's talking about. She's been confused for months. I have her full medical records, Collins interrupted sharply, certified by her physician, confirming she is of sound mind and fully capable of managing her own affairs. Your attempt to establish incompetence will not hold. One of the officers stepped forward. Ma'am, we'll need you to stay calm and remain seated while we review the documents. Vanessa's composure began to crack. Daniel, say something. Daniel stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly. Vanessa, is it true? Did you forge her signature? Her head snapped toward him. Of course not. How could you even ask me that? but I could see the panic creeping into her eyes. Collins continued methodically, laying out the evidence, the fake email address, the mortgage application, the intercepted mail. Each piece landed like a hammer. Daniel's face turned ashen. "Vanessa, this could ruin us." "Us?" She shot back, her voice rising. "You were the one who told me we needed the money. You were the one who said we should use the Maplewood house." "Enough," Collins said firmly. "The evidence speaks for itself. Now, the question is whether Mr. Parker intends to cooperate or be charged as an accomplice." Daniel's eyes darted between Collins, Vanessa, and me. His breathing quickened. "I didn't know she forged anything," he said quickly. "I didn't sign anything. This was all Vanessa's idea." Vanessa's jaw dropped. "You coward," she spat. "You were right there with me. You agreed to everything." Daniel's voice cracked. "I didn't agree to crimes. I thought it was just financial planning." The room erupted into overlapping accusations. Vanessa calling him a liar, Daniel insisting he was innocent. The officers exchanged knowing glances, clearly used to this kind of unraveling. I stood silently, watching the scene play out. It was ugly, yes, but it was also clarifying. Daniel would save himself at any cost. Vanessa would fight until her last breath, even if it meant dragging him down with her. Collins raised his voice over the chaos. "Mrs. Parker has decided to file charges and pursue this matter in court. Vanessa, you will leave this property today. Daniel, whether you remain here will depend on your level of cooperation going forward." Vanessa's face twisted in fury. "You vindictive old woman," she hissed at me. "After everything we've done for you—" I met her gaze steadily. "After everything you've done to me, you don't get to play the victim here." The officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us," one said, taking Vanessa gently but firmly by the arm. She jerked back, glaring at Daniel. "This is your fault, all of it." Daniel couldn't even look at her. His shoulders sagged, his head bowed in defeat. As they led Vanessa out of the house, the tension seemed to drain from the room, replaced by an almost eerie quiet. Collins turned to me. "She'll be formally charged with fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. There's more than enough evidence to proceed." I nodded. "And Daniel?" Collins glanced at him. "That depends on his next steps. If he cooperates, he may avoid the worst of it. But he is not off the hook." Daniel finally looked at me, his eyes wet. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far." I held his gaze for a long moment. "You let it go exactly this far, and now you'll live with that." I straightened my shoulders. "Neither of you will stay in this house, and I will see this case through to the end." Daniel dropped his head again, silent. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my chest. Not completely, there was still a long road ahead, but enough to take a full, deep breath. As the door closed behind the officers and Vanessa, Collins gave me a small nod. "That was the turning point, Mrs. Parker. From here on, it's about securing your future." I looked around the living room, my living room, and let the reality sink in. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I had truly taken my home back. The trial began 3 months later, in the cold bite of early spring. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where justice felt both heavy and inevitable. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Mr. Collins, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat in a tailored navy suit, her hair perfectly styled, her expression calm, too calm. She radiated the same confidence she'd worn the day she first slid the rental contract across my desk, as if she still believed she could talk her way out of anything. Daniel sat 2 chairs down from her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His suit was rumpled, his tie crooked. His eyes never met mine. The prosecution began with the evidence: forged mortgage applications, the fake email addresses, the suspicious credit inquiries. Each document was entered into the record, with Collins narrating in his calm, steady voice. The judge's expression didn't change, but I saw the jurors lean forward. Vanessa's attorney tried to argue that I was confused, that the documents could have been clerical errors, that she had acted only out of concern for my well-being. But Collins countered with certified medical evaluations showing I was mentally sound, fully capable of managing my affairs. And then came the turning point. The testimony of Greg, the private investigator Martha's cousin, who told the court Vanessa had approached him to dig for signs of mental decline. His refusal and her persistence in seeking someone else landed like a stone in still water. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her composure. Daniel's testimony followed. At first, he tried to soften his involvement, painting himself as someone swept along by Vanessa's determination. But under cross-examination, he admitted to knowing about the forged documents, to benefiting from the financial planning she orchestrated, and to staying silent. His voice broke on the stand. I thought it was under control. I didn't think it would get this far. The courtroom was silent except for the scribbling of pens. And then, in the back row, I saw Rebecca and Linda slip into the gallery. They hadn't been there for the earlier sessions. They'd both said they were too busy, too unsure about taking sides. But now, they sat rigid in their seats, their eyes fixed on the evidence piling against Vanessa. When Collins displayed the forged signature on the mortgage application side by side with my real one, Linda's face went pale. Rebecca leaned forward, whispering something to her sister. During the recess, they approached me in the hallway. "Mom," Rebecca said, her voice low, "we didn't realize all of this." Linda nodded, looking ashamed. "We thought maybe you were overreacting." But seeing her, she glanced toward the defense table where Vanessa stood talking animatedly to her attorney. "I understand," I said quietly, and I did. They had been far away, hearing only Vanessa's version of events. Now they were seeing the truth for themselves. When court resumed, their presence felt like an invisible shield at my back. The verdict came at the end of the week. The jury found Vanessa guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse. The judge's sentence was firm: 5 years in prison, eligible for parole after 3. Daniel's outcome was different. His lawyer had negotiated a plea agreement in exchange for his cooperation. He received a suspended sentence, 18 months probation, restitution payments to me, and mandatory financial counseling. He looked at me when the judge read the sentence, his expression a mix of shame and relief. I didn't look away, but I didn't smile either. After the session, Rebecca and Linda walked out of the courthouse with me. "You were incredible in there," Rebecca said. "You were strong," Linda added. "We should have believed you from the start." I paused on the courthouse steps, the sunlight warm on my face. What matters is that you believe me now. At home that evening, the house felt different, not just because Vanessa was gone, but because the shadow she'd cast had finally lifted. The rooms felt lighter, the air easier to breathe. Collins stopped by to finalize some paperwork. "The house is secure," he said, tapping the folder in his hand. "No liens, no outstanding claims. And with the restitution payments, you'll have a steady stream of income for the foreseeable future." I nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. For the first time in a long while, the word future didn't feel frightening. Rebecca and Linda helped me cook dinner that night, laughing softly in the kitchen the way they used to when they were teenagers. I watched them from the doorway, the warmth in my chest a quiet counterpoint to the cold battles of the past months. I had my home. I had my freedom. And slowly, I was getting my family back. The weeks following the trial passed in a blur of court filings, restitution payments, and emotional resets. But through it all, I rediscovered something I thought I had lost: the rhythm of my own life. I woke one morning and found myself pulling open the blinds to sunlight streaming through the Maplewood living room windows. It was subtle, almost unnoticed. Until that moment, my world had felt like a waiting room. Now, instead, it felt like home again. I decided to volunteer at the local senior center, a place I had helped start years ago before moving in with Daniel and Vanessa. The first day, I walked in carrying fresh muffins, welcomed faces lighting up as they saw me. "Evelyn, back with us!" they exclaimed. The room was bright, full of life. I shared my story with them, not for sympathy, but as a warning. How an elderly woman could be targeted by those she trusted. How paper and signatures could become weapons. How isolation becomes the silence predators rely on. I taught them to keep their documents close, to check credit reports regularly, to demand transparency from those around them. Many told me my words felt like a shield. At home, the mail trickled back to a normal pace. I opened envelopes addressed to me, not filtered through someone else's attention. I paid my own bills, made my grocery list, planned my meals. The house was mine again, not just in name, but in daily choice. One afternoon, I stepped onto the patio that backed up to the pool that Vanessa had installed at our expense. The water sparkled under the sun, clean and inviting. I paused, sipping iced tea, and marveled that it was now a part of my sanctuary. I had lived through betrayal, injustice, and a trial that could have broken me. But now it was mine to enjoy in peace. Despite the restoration of my life, a part of me remained wary of old hurt, and that wariness took shape when Daniel reached out. One morning, the phone rang. The caller ID said, "Daniel." My chest tightened. I had blocked most attempts, but this call slipped through. I glanced at Mr. Collins' file resting on the table, reminding myself of the boundaries I had set and the victory I'd earned. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then, out of curiosity, I played his message. "Mom, Daniel here. I'm sorry for everything. I've been in therapy, trying to face what I did. If you're willing, maybe we can talk. I'd like to try to make amends." My breath caught, and then steadied. I pressed delete. That evening, I penned a response instead of calling him back. "Daniel, I forgive you. For my peace, not for yours. But some wounds close slowly, and trust is rebuilt patiently. I will remain at Maplewood. If you ever visit with humility and respect, we will speak at a distance. But I am no longer the mother who would unquestioningly fill your life with my presence. I choose peace, Evelyn." I didn't send it immediately. I reread it twice. In the end, I never needed to send it. Silence was my answer. Not long after, Martha knocked on my door holding a basket of apples picked from an old tree in her own backyard. We sat on the Maplewood porch swing, the late afternoon sun painting long shadows across the lawn. "You look lighter," she said softly, squinting at the horizon. I smiled. "I feel lighter." I looked over my shoulder at the house. This house. It's more than bricks and memories. It's proof. That people like them. She gestured vaguely beyond the street. "Can't take everything." I nodded. Vanessa's architected a dream with my stolen equity, and now I live in it. The kitchen, the pool, the light, it all came to me, paid for by her wrongdoing. I took Martha's hand. It feels ironic, but mostly, it feels just. She squeezed my hand. "So what's next?" I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to distant birds on the Maplewood trees. Next I live, on my own terms. No fears, no pretending. I'm Evelyn Parker. I know my worth, and I'm finally where I belong. Martha raised her basket. "Here's to that." We sat quietly, letting the comfort of the moment settle in. Maplewood didn't need redecorating anymore. It just needed honesty and presence. Later that evening, the sunset poured golden across the kitchen counters. I pulled out a cookbook and made spaghetti sauce, simple, satisfying. With windows open, a breeze drifted through, carrying the hum of new neighbors greeting each other. A family of children played in the street. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped outside. In the light, I saw myself as I had fought so hard to become. Unshakable. Worthy. Whole. That night, before closing the blinds, I stood at the kitchen entrance and spoke softly to Harold's memory, to the empty rooms, to the house that had survived. I am Evelyn Parker. I know my worth, and I am exactly where I belong.